Few modern sci-fi series have caused as much of an uproar, garnered such a cult following, or earned a reputation as brutal as this one. Even if you haven't read a single page, even if you don't read sci-fi at all, you've likely heard the name. Or you know someone who is completely obsessed. But beneath a fanatical devotion lies a story that demands your full attention. Today we find out if this world truly lives up to the legend or if it's just another gilded lie. I'm talking, of course, about Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into book 1. No spoilers, just my honest breakdown on if this book lives up to the massive legacy surrounding it, or if Darrow's story falls short of the hype. Now, before we begin, I am not a professional book editor. Take my words and my grades with a grain of salt. This is just my personal opinion for book 1 of Red Rising. I'm just a guy that's been reading and loving books for over 20 years, so please do not take what I say as law. Now, with that being said, if you are a Red Rising veteran or have already read book 1 and you want to see a newcomer's live reaction journey through Mars, check out my full reading vlog. But be warned, it does contain spoilers, so if you haven't read the book yet, just be mindful of that. Let's get into it. So first, let's talk about the setting or the atmosphere, the style of the world building. I think that Pierce Brown does a masterful job at grounding you in a setting in the minds of Lycos in the very beginning of the book. The overall imagery, the lives that they live, the depiction of the people in the mines, I think is very well done, and I can just picture where he is and Darrow's circumstances almost immediately. It's immersive, it's visceral, it's claustrophobic, it's sad, but on the flip side, Pierce Brown does a really good job at showing that the Reds are not just woe is me type of people. They understand that their lives are hard, but they don't just give in to the despair. And in my opinion, it immediately makes me want to root for the Reds. Now later in the book, the overall setting really just opens up. Now the only reason why I gave it a 9 instead of a 10 is that I really just wanted more. The setting was so good that I really just wanted to know more. Maybe I'm just a fan of 10 book sprawling fantasy and sci-fi series where there's tons and tons of world building, but I wanted to know more about where Darrow is in the universe, and I understand that a lot of that was withheld for plot reasons, but I really just wanted to know more. We started off in the mines of Lycos. We get a glimpse into what Mars is actually like, and then we basically immediately go into the Institute. And for the remainder of the book, Darrow is really just at the Institute. But ultimately, I'm really hungry for a wider scope. And again, this is just in regards to book 1. I'm sure in book 2 and 3 and so on that it really opens up and we get to see more of the setting, but again, this is just for book 1. Now my score of a 9 reflects a world that I already love in this book, but I just want to explore more. Characters and character depth. Now this section is in regards to supporting cast only. We're not talking about the main protagonist, Darrow, just every other character. In my opinion, this is where this book really shines. I think that Brown created characters that felt important, and most importantly, they earned that importance. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, whether a character is likable or loved or hated, despised, they occupy that space in your head. And there are many book series and book 1s especially where a character's kind of just introduced and honestly you just kind of forget about them. Once they leave the page, that's it, but not in this book. It was so easy to pick a favorite, several, and so easy to despise certain characters. And what I find most impressive is that at only 382 pages, which is relatively short compared to many of the other large expansive series that I read and that I'm fond of, I truly cared about those characters. And in sub 400 pages, Brown really made me care about the characters. Like I truly wanted to know what happened. I was sad when characters died. I was happy when they didn't die, and with such a relatively short book, I shouldn't care about these characters as much as I do. And in my opinion, the emotional return on investment is massive. With that being said, this section, I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. I think Pierce Brown did such an excellent job with the cast of characters that 10 out of 10 was an easy score to give. Okay, let's talk about plot and pacing. Now, I think that this book does really well in terms of pacing. I was told before reading it that it's kind of like a rocket ship. It starts off a little bit slow and then it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And to me, that's exactly what happened. There was not a single moment in the book where I felt like the pacing was dragging or I just wanted them to get to something else and move on from a certain situation. There was no point in the book where I felt that at all. It truly builds momentum like a freight train. Now, with that being said, my biggest gripe overall with the book is the final act. Brown did such a good job building momentum, building expectation, that I felt like the final act maybe just could have had another 30 to 50 pages and it would have been absolutely perfect. Now again, this falls into a similar gripe with setting, is I just love the book so much that I just wanted more. I foresaw a big collision of major players in the book, but then all of a sudden I realized that I was on the last chapter and it probably just wasn't gonna happen. Now that's not to say that Brown didn't have a tidy ending, because he did. But again, I just think that maybe an extra chapter or two, maybe a 30 to 50 pages in this book would have ended perfectly. Now this section is what I call the just read test. Let me explain. For a book to score well in this section, it has to hijack my attention span. When I'm reading the book, I just want to read the book. No phones, no computer, no distractions. I am in the book. When I'm not reading the book, if I'm at work or driving my car, I'm thinking about the book. So if a book scores well in that regard, I think that has really hijacked my attention and I just want to read it. Now with that being said, Red Rising was an absolute attention hijacker. I simply did not want to stop reading. Now whether it was the quality of the prose, the rocket ship style pacing, or maybe just the vlogging process and my excitement about my first reading vlog, I just could not tear myself away from this book. And I wanted to read it at every little chance I could all throughout the day, which does not happen very often. There are not a lot of book series that I just cannot get my head away from. For me, we're talking series like The Expanse, Stormlight Archives, Wheel of Time, the Black Company series. These are series that just live in my head rent-free. And after I started Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I am absolutely obsessed with, I did not think that another series could grab my attention quite as hard as Carl and Donut's Adventures, but Red Rising Book 1 absolutely did that. This next section is about the main protagonist only. We're talking Darrow. Right out of the gate, I love Darrow. He's not a woe is me character. He's not suddenly an expert at everything. He's easily likable. You want to root for him, and you also feel bad for him when bad things happen in the story. Now, in a book set in the first person, liking the main character is so important. You are essentially reading the book through his viewpoint. You're essentially Darrow through the book. Now, if the main protagonist, especially in a first-person story, falls short, then ultimately the entire book is probably going to fall short. But that is not the case with this book. Darrow is a powerhouse of a character. His transition from the Mines of Lycos into the Institute was fascinating. I love that Brown did not just depict Darrow as an angry, revenge-filled man. He also shows Darrow's tactical mind and his thinking process throughout the book. There are certain scenes in the book that I truly felt bad for Darrow. And that's not something that happens with every book that I read. I think too often for a series, you kind of read the story from an outside point of view. You might not be invested in the characters. You want to know what happens to them, but if something tragic happens to a character, you might not really feel that bad, which is terrible to say, but that is not the case with Darrow. When Darrow experiences sadness or anger, I feel it right there with him. And in my opinion, Darrow is a character that I just want to keep following into the next book and likely the next book and the next book after that. And that's why I'm going to give Darrow, the main man, a 10 out of 10. Now, when you tally up all of the scores, Red Rising receives a 9.6. A score like that, for me, signals a gold standard book. Now, with that being said, I don't think that there is a perfect book out there. Even my favorite series of all time, The Expanse, is not perfect. But storytelling and writing is an art form. And I think if something is always perfect, it ceases to be art. So with that being said, I highly recommend this book. I know I'm a little late to the game, so so most people have probably read this book already, but if you haven't, I would recommend this book. Now, in the running for best book ones of a series ever, this one is definitely up there. If you are like me and were avoiding the hype around Red Rising, it's definitely worth checking out. You might not like it as much as me, you might like it even more than me, but regardless, I would say give it a shot. But that is it for me and my review on book 1 of Red Rising. Again, go check out the vlog if you want to see a newbie's reaction to this book. I plan on having Golden Sun's vlog up relatively soon, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see y'all in the next one.